A phenomenal actor has been picked to play Ozzy Osbourne in upcoming biopic. Jack Osbourne, Ozzy's son, revealed on SiriusXM show with Billy Morrison, "We are in full steam in the next phase of development with this movie. It's an acted movie we've been developing with Sony Studios for 6 years already." As for which actor, Jack says, "We've decided our pick. I can't say anything yet, but it's a phenomenal actor. We have a director attached and we're doing a rewrite now." And they've been doing rewrites for a few years. They talked about it on their Osbourne's podcast. They noted that Ozzy would have gotten a kick out of this movie. That when Jack would tell Ozzy about it, Ozzy would say, "I don't give a shit. Just tell me when it's out so I can go see it." Yeah, they've discussed it a couple of times on their podcast. Ozzy didn't believe he'd be alive to see it, and unfortunately, he won't be. But, we know what he would think. In 2020, Ozzy stated, "From what I understand, it's about Sharon and I and our relationship, how we met, fell in love, and how we married. She's my other half, grew up a lot with me, and I grew up a lot with her." I think that Sharon has this very interesting perspective of the whole building the Ozzy foundation that I don't know that we've heard enough of or a lot of. We've probably heard a lot, but I feel like there's more to it because Ozzy's story shines so bright. He's the guy on the stage. He's the voice we always hear. Sharon planning every show, booking out Tower Records and getting him to sign these records and making the book and part of the music business or entertainment business is turning something, just a thing I did that's cool, into an event. That's the challenge. Like, okay, I did something cool. Now, how can I make it worth showcasing? This blabbermouth is going crazy with ads. It's like looking at a strobe light this whole time. Sharon says it's not going to be kid-friendly. It's going to be rated R, made for adults, which I said yesterday I think will make it age better. If you just make it the way you want it, it'll become a timeless movie. If you try and center it towards someone, you will make it towards them. But, they'll grow up one day, and then who will the movie be for at that point? Whereas the other way around, if you make it for adults, people who miss it when it comes out will grow up and be able to watch it. I think I'm going to close this window because it's like a strobe light. I think that just like everything Ozzy does and Sharon manages to do with Ozzy, that they will make an event out of this. That is Ozzy's specialty. That's why Ozzy always came back and grew and fit in well with every era because they dressed it slowly and carefully and imagined how do you feel happiest in yourself and authentic the most. And that's what's good about Sharon is like, every era that he's come back has been her being a successful manager, and the massive amount of wealth they've acquired. I mean, not every musician is able to do that. So anyway, yeah, this is exciting because I know it was huge news that he did the Back to the Beginning show, and then huge news that Ozzy passed away. And there was fairly consistent Ozzy news before that. He was always on the podcast, and he did a few shows here and there. And this has been kind of the drop that we've all been grieving and thinking about what a world without Ozzy would look like. And I know, 6 to 12 months are about to go by, and we'll think a little bit less about him. He's impossible to forget. But the point I'm trying to make is when we've kind of grieved and become okay with this new reality, boom. Ozzy is going to be into the mainstream again. He's going to be back in all of our lives, and I can't wait to see this new dimension of his story be told. When I think about I Am Ozzy, you know, they and then the new book, The Last Rites, I'm only like halfway through with the new book, but most of it so far kind of recaps the stories in I Am Ozzy. But I Am Ozzy is kind of the definitive book that tells the story. And in fact, I wish I Am Ozzy even had more to it, because it's I mean, I read it in middle school, so I mean, it's very readable. And the story is so good. Just them being Black Sabbath and recording their whole first album in like 8 hours, because they had practiced the song, their set so much for like 2 years that they could just show up anywhere and play the whole thing. And they not only did they, you know, they in that 8 hours, not only did they play each song, they played each song 2 or 3 times. They just ran through the set. Some of the 8 hours was probably just set up and tear down, and really, like, it was probably just a few hours that they played the songs. They were just, because they were young and confident. And also, I feel like the Black Sabbath guys, and this is what makes them special, they might not have been so desperately clinging on and having a strong desire to be these huge famous superstars. They were just making what they thought was totally awesome. They were inserting their own influence, combining it with everything else that was around, which happened to be a totally new thing. And I think they knew it was awesome, and they believed in themselves, but they had no idea it would be this worldwide pioneers of music thing. And so they just showed up with confidence and played that first album. Other cool stories, like when they were in the mansion in Bel Air, and Ozzy accidentally pushed what he thought was the air conditioning. You know how they always have like a 911 button. He accidentally pushed 911, and they had a lot of cocaine, and like 3 cop cars showed up, and he thought it was about a drug bust, and they were all in the bathroom trying to flush as much cocaine as they could, pour it in the sink, and snorting as much cocaine as they could, while the housekeeper was in the entryway just telling the cops, "Oh, no problem. It must have been an accident," and the cops just left, which is crazy. And then I think he said something like he didn't sleep for 2 days after that. Another story that I remember from I Am Ozzy is when they were at a hotel pool that Satan worshipers would like crowd around them or somehow approach them. And they were always like, "Man, we're not actually like Satan worshipers. We're not actually trying to connect with the devil here. We just really liked heavy music, Zeppelin, Helter Skelter, The Who, whatever. And then we just really just in the blues and performed as our own feeling and selves. And that's just what came out. And we latched onto something. We knew they knew about that movie, Sabbath, Black Sabbath. It was called Black Sabbath, a 50s horror movie. And they named the band after that because that song had that kind of vibe. And they used to be called Earth. And they accidentally got booked for a show because there was another band called Earth. And that other band played the genre of the show, some kind of funk or something. And so it was like this dance hall, and everybody was expecting funk. And then Black Sabbath shows up to play this heavy shit, played a super awkward show. They're like, "We're changing our name." Wow, the stories are just coming back to me. Also, when they were very early on, like late 60s still, Tony Iommi left Black Sabbath for a few months because I always get confused with the Yes singer and the Jethro Tull singer. Ian Anderson, right? Oh gosh, now I gotta confirm this real quick. This is one of my favorite bands. and I can't remember his name. Singer. Ian Anderson. Yes, I was right. Ian Anderson offered for Tony Iommi to be guitar for Jethro Tull, and Tony left, and Ozzy said he was devastated, went home to his dad, and told his dad, like, Tony's left, and his dad said something along the lines of, like, oh, you can figure it out, find someone else. And Ozzy was like, I know my dad had good intentions, but he just didn't understand there wasn't another guitarist like Tony. It had to be Tony. And Tony learned some good information playing with Jethro Tull. He learned work ethic. He said they started at 8 a.m. and they practiced all day long. And it wasn't just kind of like hangout sessions. It was like grinding and really working. So he learned just work ethic, and I forgot what else he said he learned, but he said he wasn't feeling it. And he went back to the guys, which was a tremendous risk at the time because Jethro Tull was successful in touring. Sabbath, they weren't bringing in money or any kind of career or anything. He just felt it. It was a good fit. And he wanted to keep pursuing and working on it and seeing if anything could come from it. I just remembered I'm wearing a really cool Black Sabbath shirt. Here it is. Yeah. And so, then, unfortunately, in the late 70s, paranoia strikes. The drugs and alcohol gets out of control. And Ozzy, there's like a few times where he quits, rejoins, gets fired, rejoins, something like that. They even had a replacement singer, and then he rejoined in like 78 or 79. It was 2 or 3 rounds of leaving and coming back, but there was a final time where Ozzy was no longer in the band, sometime around 1979, and he was living down the street from where I am right now. He was living Gil Turner's. So when you head down Sunset toward the Whiskey, there's a liquor store called Gil Turner's, and that is the same liquor store he was ordering from when he first was gone from Black Sabbath and no life purpose anymore, and 3 kids back in England and a wife, and he was just in an apartment alone. He would order takeout, but just liquor, no food. And he said in the summer in LA, he would crank the AC and turn on the fireplace and close the curtains and kind of reenact England inside summer LA. And he probably had good money to be living that lifestyle for a few more months. Eventually the money was going to run dry. They didn't make like massive millions dollars back then. They could have, but none of the rock bands did. The Beatles, Kiss, all these bands that the artists are known to having hundreds of millions, or music's first billionaire, Paul McCartney, they made that money after the 70s because they were being ripped off in the 70s. They didn't know what perpetuity meant or any kind of business knowledge or contract, or had the right lawyers on their side. Yeah. So this is the recent, 2019 and 2020 are when they commented on the age Ozzy would be in this movie. 2019, Sharon said he would be around 20, which is the very beginning of Black Sabbath. 2020, Ozzy said it would be age 30 Ozzy. And both of those references are according to that Blabbermouth article. So we'll see what age he ends up being. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, is this 30-year-old Ozzy. He's in LA drinking himself, and Sharon shows up and says, we're making a band. I need to reread the book. What I'm unclear on is how they went from the drummer, Kerslake, and what's the bassist name that starts with a B? Daisley. Brad Daisley? Something like that. They switched them out for Rudy Sarzo and Tony Aldridge, who became the touring band for the next few years. Why did they make that switch? That's my question. I'm just asking you. I don't have an answer. And why did they go away from Aldridge and Sarzo after that? Because who is the other the other drummer that unfortunately passed away from cancer? Rich Ozzy drummer, because there's that awesome guy. Oh yeah, Tommy Clufetos was the name on my head, but Randy Castillo was the one that passed away. Yeah, Aldridge featured on Bark at the Moon, Curse Lake, 2 first albums, Blizzard and Diary. Let's just look this up real quick. Why did Curse Lake leave Ozzy's band? Money control, credit disputes. Wow, there's Lee Kerslake standing next to them in the band. Oh, and his name is Bob Daisley, not Brad. He felt Bob Daisley and himself weren't paid fairly or given proper contracts. He believed he deserved more recognition for his contributions. Tensions with Sharon over finance. And the exit. Aftermath, he returned to Uriah Heep, where he had stability and respect. Now, I'm interested, what has Ozzy commented on these disputes? Because I think Ozzy does talk about it in his book. Ozzy's stance has been consistent and blunt. He claims limited involvement in business matters. Ozzy has repeatedly said he was not in charge of contracts, payments, or credit, and that those decisions were handled by management, primarily Sharon. He disputes the songwriting claims. Ozzy has said that Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslake were paid as hired musicians and that their later claims to songwriting or ownership were overstated. He has expressed frustration, not regret. Ozzy has publicly characterized the lawsuits and public complaints as dragging out the best, saying he wishes the focus stayed on the music rather than the legal battles. Because he probably thinks, yeah, these guys did help, and they did make good contributions. I wish we could have talked about it more. He avoided detailed counter-accusations. Rather than getting technical, tends to deflect specifics, repeating that he trusted management, moved on once disputes turned legal. Yeah, and Ozzy did the right thing. I don't know why Ozzy needs to really jump in further, because in the end of the day, he's still singing. And the next musicians will come in and be amazing. No public apology or reversal. Ozzy's never formally acknowledged wrongdoing and how Kerslake or Daisley were treated, nor reversed his position on credits or reissues. The subtext reading between the lines, Ozzy frames the situation as, I was the artist, not the accountant. I guess we'll never know the full truth. And I'm sure there's 2 sides. But I'm also, I don't know. Good question. Yeah, and then I feel like that's the side of the story I know pretty well, because when it starts to turn to mid-late 80s, I don't know. I know the songs. I don't know the albums as much. But then, yeah, I guess they did the Osbournes in the early 2000s. That would be cool if the movie went into the whole era and we even saw a snippet of them doing the Osbournes or whatever. Yeah, there's just so much. I'm sure it's going to be a challenge packing that into 2 hours. So, who do you think should play Ozzy Osbourne? Did I say that at the beginning? Wow, that was the whole point of making this video. Who should play Ozzy Osbourne? Because Jack Osbourne recommended Bill Hader in one Osbourne's podcast. And while I think Bill Hader would be an amazing Ozzy for like SNL, like playing, you know, the Ozzy we know now, the dark complexion with the glasses, if the movie's about 20 or 30-year-old Ozzy, this isn't an age thing, but it was kind of a different era. He kind of had a different look. And I don't know, maybe someone that kind of matches that style. People might say Youngblood, but Youngblood's doing his own thing, and he's close to the family. I think it would be kind of weird. Who do you think? That guy in the Motley Crue movie was good, but he was in the Motley Crue movie, and Sharon expressed, what's the right word? She's not friends with them, and I feel like she would just want to go a different direction than reusing what they did. Let's see. Why did Sharon have a falling out with some or all of the Motley Crue guys? Okay, here's a new question. Why did Sharon fall out with Motley Crue? Power struggles, disrespect, Sharon's zero tolerance management style. Tour and chaos behavior. During shared tour eras, Sharon felt they were reckless, disrespectful backstage, hard to control, so they crossed the lines that jeopardized Ozzy's show and reputation. Sharon runs a tight ship. See, this is the side I want to see more of. The crew didn't respond to her authority, which led to open hostility rather than compromise. Members, especially Nikki Sixx, have mocked Sharon publicly over the years. Ooh, that's embarrassing for him. Business first mindset. Sharon is famously ruthless when she thinks Ozzy is being undermined. Once trust broke, she cut ties permanently. Sharon's view, in her own words, paraphrased, she's described the band as disrespectful and unmanageable. She said she doesn't regret burning the bridge, her position protecting Ozzy over maintaining friendships. Okay, yeah, makes sense. I can see it. They were wild. Now, they're tame now. I wonder if it's still the same deal or if it's just, I don't know. It's difficult. I wasn't around in the 80s or 90s, or I know this was mostly the 80s. So for me, it's just like a time that didn't exist, and now I just see the mature old versions of everyone. But just like how I think 5 years ago was yesterday, they probably think, 35 years ago. They're still living in the later years of those times, totally different perspectives. So I get that, but I'm excited for this movie. I'm going to be the one on the day it comes out, checking it out. And man, I wish we got more time with Ozzy, but it was time. He was struggling a lot. And if you watch that documentary that dropped, Coming Home, maybe. Yeah, he was struggling a lot. He jumped into his bed one night and missed the bed and broke his neck. Oof. Yeah, anyway. What do you think? Who should play him? And thanks for tuning in. Subscribe to support if you want to see more conversations like this. And yeah, see you around.